today what we're going to do is look at how to use semantic kernel in order to add value to a multi-step workflow, where each step in the workflow needs to be context aware of its goals, what it's trying to accomplish, and the content that's currently in this form that we're using next to the Copilot. All right, so we're looking at OmniGeist. This is our system for generating long-form narrative content, managing IPs, all that stuff. And our process that we're talking about is we're scaffolding ideas together. If you've ever made a sculpture, you start off with like a wire skeleton and then you build clay on top of it, and that's what we're doing with grounding. And here, what we have is this long-form form with a bunch of information in it. And this is the chat. In this situation, we're just going to say, I like the Enneagram, I get what that's all about, they're a supporting character, I want to understand the description field better. So we're going to make a request, and what's going to happen on the back end is Semantic Kernel is going to get a JSON object that represents all of the fields on our character view model that the LLM might care about. We're injecting that into the middle of our prompt, and we're saying, give me a description of how this is relevant in character development. Right? And then if you want a recommendation, you can ask for one right here. We're going to get a suggestion back. But here you go. You have the current value. He's a puka. Now he's a mischievous puka. It's sort of a happy, glad change, but we're seeing it work. Right? And then you can accept the change, and you can actually save all of the stuff in your view model back to Entity Framework. So here we can see what happens when we want to get the help message that we saw earlier. What we're going to first do is find out what the name of our prompt is going to be. And this one is explain character field description. And if we look at our config for semantic kernel, it's going to explain what this method does, what type it is, how many tokens it should use, and we have an input variable, and that is the messages from chat summarized. And then we're passing in the serialized view model. And I've got some tools that I use to just pull off the values that I want AI to care about, right? We don't care about foreign key relationships, things like that. The next thing that I want you to see is we're just sending our arguments to a single prompt. It's much more straightforward. Here we just have our chat message. I've got a little method here that'll summarize up our input, and then we're getting the name of what type of entity this is, like a character model, a world model, things like that. And then we're going to invoke, right? So we're going to say run explain character field description and pass in the chat history and the view model. And we want to show the suggestion button, and we want to make sure that we say that this is not a user message, it's a system message. Hi, so now I want to show you a somewhat more interesting implementation, and this is when we request a recommendation, right? A suggested value from the system for a field. And even though my use case is we're designing a character for a narrative, your use case might be we're filling out a tax form, right? What we have is there's a bunch of context we want to inject into the prompt. We want to explain what the user is trying to do. We want to show you what they've done. And we want to get your recommendation based on what they have and what you think the goal is. And then we want you to also explain why you made that recommendation. So that's what we're doing here. And then later on, we want the user to be able to accept that or reject it to keep the human in the middle. All right. So we're adding in a function pointing over here to our get character field suggestion. This is the prompt. And you'll notice that this prompt is requiring the LLM to return the value in a structure of a JSON document. And we're getting this object back. And what we do is for each of those changes, we are deserializing and we're turning them into, we're getting a number of these change recommendations that we can actually work with. So then what we have is we have our change recommendations, we have our response, we append that with a message to a new chat message, and send this back to the user.